The Sierra Nevada, California, Part 6. Home. Akira's house was barely visible in the thick, dark smoke as she and Dodger galloped onto her family's property. They had managed to stay one step ahead of Morris on their ride down the mountain, but from the hot wind at her back and the way Dodger's ears were constantly focused behind them, Akira knew the wildfire was close. Akira's long one-story house sat on a flat piece of land with a small red barn out back. Akira glanced at the fenced-in area outside the barn. There was Elwood. He'd made it back. Akira let out a whoop of joy. Now, if only her father and Sue's dad had made it back safe. Someone was in the front yard, wetting down the house with a hose, and Akira recognized her at once. Mom, Akira cried. She pulled Dodger up short and jumped down. Her mother tossed away the hose, and they ran into each other's arms. Akira, I was so scared I'd lost you, her mother said, wrapping her up in a hug. Me too, said Akira. What happened to you? Her mother asked. She held Akira away from her and took in all her scrapes and bruises. And what's this? She said, peeling back the dirty sock she'd used for a bandage. You're burned. You have to get this taken care of. Mom, I never found Dad, Akira said, trying not to cry. He's here. He's inside, her mother told her. I'll put Dodger in the pen. Go. Akira thought she might burst. She ran inside the house, and there was her father, lying on the couch. Akira shed her backpack and ran into his arms. Akira, he said, his voice raspy, I tried to go back and look for you, but the police were blocking all the roads in and out of the fire. He sobbed into her hair as he hugged her tight. I hated to leave you. I was so sure you were dead. I thought you were too, Akira said, and now she was crying. Kira, her little sister Hildy yelled, running into the room. She threw herself onto the pile on the couch and hugged Akira with the ferociousness of a 4-year-old. Akira laughed. It felt so good to be together with her family again. Their mother joined them a minute later. She'd brought the box of bandages and antibiotic ointment from the bathroom, and she pulled Akira into a chair to see to the burn on her arm. You smell like smoke, Hildy told Akira. Akira wiped away her tears and chuckled. She felt like she was going to smell like smoke for the rest of her life. Did Vicky call? Akira asked as her mom cleaned her wound. Is she okay? Your call was the last one I got. There's been no phone service ever since, her mother said. Akira turned to her father. What about Sue's dad and the people from the other car? Daniel and I found somebody to take the old couple to the hospital, Akira's dad said. His voice was ragged, and he was clearly having trouble breathing. Daniel went with them. The smoke really did a number on them, he added, then coughed. On you, too, Akira's mother said. Drink your water. Who's Vicky? Akira's dad asked after taking a sip. What happened to Daniel's daughter? Kira told them as quickly as she could about escaping through the burning windows with Sue, raiding Nova's house, and finding Dodger in the pool. She stopped occasionally to hiss as her mother dabbed ointment on her burn. Dodger went swimming in a pool? Hildy asked, and cackled at that thought. Soon I found a lady named Vicky in a big truck, and she drove Sue to the hospital. I hope they're okay, Akira said. After that I went higher, Dad, like you always told me, to get some perspective. That's my girl, her dad said. Akira swallowed. She didn't tell him the other perspective she'd gotten about him and climate change. This wasn't the time for that. Akira winced as her mother finished wrapping her burn with a gauze bandage. You're going to have to see a doctor soon, but you can relax, her mother said. You're home now. You're safe. The TV was on with the volume turned down low, and Akira saw live coverage of the enormous fire filmed from a helicopter. Suddenly, it all came washing back over her, running through the flames, finding the burned bodies, watching Morris wrap his fury arms around the mountain. Akira closed her eyes. She was so tired. She wished she could relax. She wanted nothing more than to curl up on the couch with her family and never have to think about Morris again. But Akira knew she couldn't. Her mother was wrong. Akira wasn't safe. None of them were. Akira stood up. Mom, Dad, we can't stay here, she told them. The wildfire is on the way. Cal Fire couldn't contain it. It's headed for our house. Oh no, Hildy cried, and she ran for her mother's arms. Akira, Akira, her dad said, raising his hand. You're overreacting. We're going to be fine where we are. What? No, Akira said. If we get in the car right now, we can make it. But we have to be fast. Where's the go bag? Like a lot of California families, the Christensens had a go bag at the ready if they needed to escape a wildfire or an earthquake. The bag held things like money, a respirator mask, and paper maps and a first aid kit, and copies of their important documents. Luckily, Akira's family had never had to use their go bags until now. Akira's mom shot a worried look at Akira's father, but he shook his head. Akira, stop, he told her. We live in fire country. We're prepared for this. The house is made of concrete, and we've got the generator running out back, so we have electricity and water from the well. Your mom went down the roof in the yard with the hose, and there's nothing burnable within 100 feet of the house. We're good. In the past, Akira would have accepted what her father told her, but not after what she'd seen, not after what she'd been through. No, Akira cried. I've been out there. You've been out there, she told her father. You've seen what's going on. It's worse than ever before. And we can't just close our eyes and pretend it's all going to sort itself out. Akira's little sister buried her head in her mother's shirt. Look, you are scaring Hildy, Akira's dad told her. You should be scared, Akira yelled. We should all be scared. Dad, the monarchs are burning. Her dad had been about to say something else, but he closed his mouth and frowned. Their trunks, maybe, but they are thick enough too, he started to explain, but Akira cut him off. Not the trunks, Dad. The leaves and branches, all the way up at the top. The Mars fire is so bad it killed the giant sequoias. Akira's mom and dad were speechless. Akira huffed. They didn't have time for this. Akira ran to the last place she remembered seeing the go bag. It was still there, buried underneath boots and shoes on the floor of the front closet. Akira pulled the go bag out and picked up Nova's backpack. Get whatever else you need to take with you and get to the car, Akira told her family. We've got to get the horse trailer hooked up so we can take Dodger and Elwood with us, but we have to hurry. Akira threw open the front door and froze. It was too late. Towering flames lit up the pine trees and the edge of their property like birthday candles, and her family's car and truck were on fire. Blenders. Oh my God, Akira's mother cried. How was the fire already here? Morris roared like a monster, and the blast of heat and wind made Akira throw a hand up and take a step back. The fire reached out toward the house with greedy arms and embers that pinged off the walls and windows. One of the embers landed on the rug in the entryway and set it on fire. Akira threw the door closed and stomped out the flame. Do you believe me now? Akira shouted. Her mother stood with Hildy in her arms, and her father was sitting up, but they weren't moving. They knew they were in trouble, but weren't doing anything. Akira looked this way and that, trying to think. I don't know where we could go now. I don't know what we do, she said. The time for doing something about the fire was before it got here, not after. We need to get in a pool, like Dodger, Hildy whined. Not a pool, the lake, Akira cried. Of course. There was a lake about a quarter of a mile behind their house. Akira kissed Hildy on the head and raced to the windows that looked out on the backyard. The barn was already on fire, and Dodger and Elwood were running around their pen in panic. But Moore's hand completely surrounded the house. Not yet. They still had a chance, but they had to leave now. If we can get to the lake, we can swim out to the island, Akira told her family. Come on, we'll be safe there. We're safe here, her father said, not moving from the couch. Lars, look at the fire, her mother snapped. Akira's right. She turned to Akira. But we'll never make it to the lake on foot. The fire's moving too fast. We can ride on Dodger and Elwood, Akira said. They're still saddled up. Dodger's already been through the fire once, and Elwood will follow wherever he leads. Akira's dad pushed himself off the couch, wheezing from the smoke he'd breathed in, escaping Morris the first time. Akira thought he'd finally listen to reason, but still he shook his head. Akira, you're just making things difficult. Let me get the hose, he said, coughing. He said to Akira's mom, get the fire extinguisher from the kitchen. The hose? The fire extinguisher? Akira cried. Dad, you have to be kidding. Morris is a mega fire. It's too late for that. The house isn't going to burn down, Akira, he said. This has happened before. The fire will go around us, like it always does. We just have to wait it out. Akira closed her eyes and fought back tears. She took a deep breath. Dad, I don't know why you don't believe in climate change, she said, and now is definitely not the time to argue about it. But for whatever reason, you've got blinders on when it comes to what's really happening out there, and it's going to get us all killed. Akira, her dad said, his voice stern, but this time Akira's mom cut him off. We're going, she said, all of us. Akira's mom added, looking at her husband, and that's final. Akira's father looked like he was still going to argue, but Akira's mother hiked Hildy up on her hip with one arm and pushed her husband toward the back door with the other. Kira followed them with her backpack and the go bag. The heat outside was like a physical assault, and they all staggered. The fire had moved to the trees along the side of the property, and as Akira and her family watched flames leapt through the tree to tree until the arc circle was complete. In the time they had taken to argue about it, the fire had completely surrounded their house. What do we do now? Akira's mother cried. Dodger and Elwood ran in circles in their pen, heads and tails up, ears swiveling, eyes darting back and forth. They were spooked so badly that Akira knew there was no way she could steer either of them calmly through the inferno. The horses would panic and throw them. Back into the house, said her father. No, look, Akira cried. She pointed to the roof, where red-hot embers had already landed and caught the asphalt shingles on fire. I don't believe it, her father whispered. Akira huffed. There was those blinders again. Why did he refuse to see what was right in front of him? Blinders, Akira said aloud. Wait here, she added, and she ran for the burning barn. 1,000-pound scaredy cats. Akira, no, her mother shouted, but Akira was already at the door of the burning barn. Akira put an arm up to block the heat radiating off the wood and stepped inside. The horse's blinders hung on a wood wall that was turning black and buckling from the fire. Akira snatched the blinders and ran back out. Mom, help me, Akira cried. Her mother handed Hildy off to Lars and hurried over. See if you can get these on Elwood, Akira said, giving her mom a set of blinders. I'll take care of Dodger. Akira ran to intercept Dodger on one of his panic circuits around the yard. Dodger, she cried, then caught herself. This wasn't going to work if she was freaking out too. Dodger, Akira said more evenly, trying to calm her own panic. Hey boy, I just need to get these blinders on you. Can we do that, huh? Dodger stopped running and stood a few yards away from Akira, his eyes still spinning wildly in his head. Horses had monocular vision, which meant they looked at things separately with each eye, rather than together with both eyes like humans, and they could see up and down and forward and back, which made them really good at spotting danger, almost too good. Add in the fact that horses did not like to be surprised, and you had 1,000-pound scaredy cats that saw danger everywhere. Blinders kept horses looking straight forward, and what they couldn't see everywhere else couldn't spook them. Dodger, I need you to help me and my family right now, okay? Akira said, keeping her tone as steady as she could. I need you to take us through the fire one last time. Can you do that? Dodger snorted. He tilted his head and gave her a look that stared deep into her soul, like he wasn't buying any of this. His look seemed to say, Are you kidding me right now? I know, Akira told him, her heart thumping out of the corner of her eye. She saw her roof fully on fire. Her house was on fire. She felt herself starting to hyperventilate, and she fought down the terror that was threatening to swallow her. She had to think of a way to get these blinders on Dodger, or they were all going to die. Up in smoke. Akira suddenly remembered the last time she tried to get Dodger to do something he didn't want to do. Get out of Nova's pool. No matter how much she'd pulled and begged and whispered encouraging words, he hadn't budged. Not until Sue had tempted him with an apple. Akira smiled at the memory of her two best friends getting to know each other better. She quickly slid Nova's backpack off her shoulder and fished around inside, keeping eye contact with Dodger the whole time to make sure he didn't run away. Look, an apple, see? She said, pulling one out. Your favorite. Even with the fire all around them, Dodger couldn't help himself. He stepped forward to take the apple from Akira's hand, and Akira held his bridle while she fixed the blinders into place. Always a sucker for an apple, she said, putting her head against his. Akira, her mother yelled. She'd gotten the blinders on Elwood and was putting Hildy up in the saddle. I'll ride with Hildy on Elwood. You and your father take the lead on Dodger. Hurry. Akira mounted Dodger and rode over to her father, who'd gotten masks for all of them out of the go bag. She helped him up behind her and put on her mask. Her father was having an even harder time breathing now, and she could feel him wheezing. Akira turned Dodger toward the dirt trail. The woods all around is where a wall of flames. It was only a 10-minute ride down to the lake, but that was without a raging inferno all around them. We have to be fast, Akira's mom said. We can't stop for anything. Akira nodded. She knew what it was like to ride through the fire. She had the burns to prove it. Kish, kish, the windows on their house shattered, and flames licked through the frames. Dodger danced underneath her, and as Akira fought to keep him under control, she felt a sudden pang of loss for all the things she hadn't had time to take with her. Her favorite books, her iPad, her clothes, her diary. Morris was eating up everything she had ever owned, everything she was, and what about all her parents' things, her father's anime collection, her mother's jewelry box, the framed photos of her mother's ancestors, all the way back to when they'd first come to California from Japan. The clock her Norwegian grandfather had made, it was all on fire. I can't believe it, her father said again. Maybe now you will, Akira thought. She kicked her legs, and off Dodger went, down the fire-edged trail. A clear path. The sunburn heat on the path was immediate and intense. Entire trees were outlined in white-orange flame, and the forest floor withered alive with fire. Only the dirt path straight ahead of them was free of flames. Akira heard Hildy cry out and wanted to look back, but she had to keep her eyes on the trail. They're okay, Akira's father told her. They're right behind us. Keep going. Akira spurred Dodger on, and he broke out into a fast trot. Without his height, without his speed, she and her father would never have survived the dash through the fire. And Elwood was doing the same for Akira's mother and sister. Akira felt herself choke up. Dodger was putting himself through this awful danger just because she had asked him to. She patted his withers and told him what a good horse he was. Whether he heard her over the roar and crackle of the fire, Akira didn't know. But she thought he understood. The two of them shared a connection that went beyond words and actions. It was the purest connection Akira had had with anybody or anything in her entire life. Dodger could still see the flames ahead of them with his blinders on, but his focus was on the flat dirt path that created a narrow fire break through the burning woods. For years, Akira and her dad had been keeping the path clear by moving fallen branches and tree trunks to either side of the trail. But now, those same trees and branches were easy fodder for Morris. They burned like kindling, creating a searing 3 foot high wall of flame on either side. Kira's father hacked and coughed uncontrollably behind her, and the two of them bent low, trying to escape the heavy smoke and the burning tree branches. Akira was bathed in sweat all over again, and the burns radiated with pain. How far had they gone? How much longer did they have to go? Everything looked different in the fire. All of Akira's old landmarks were gone. Suddenly, Dodger came to a stop right in the middle of the burning path. Akira didn't understand. She spurred him on, but he wouldn't budge. Akira, what's wrong? Her mother cried. Because Dodger had stopped, Elwood had stopped too. Now they were all roasting in the searing heat. Akira, her father said, coughing so much she could barely speak. Make him go. I'm trying, Akira called back. Dodger, what's wrong? She asked. He couldn't answer her, of course. Akira looked all around, trying to figure out what was making him hesitate. The path ahead of them was clear. Everything else was blazing trees and burning ground and black smoke. But that's what the forest had looked like from the very beginning. Akira slumped in the saddle, feeling helpless and lost. What was Dodger trying to tell her that she didn't understand? Horse sense. Akira squeezed her legs and flicked the reins again, but Dodger wouldn't move. Come on, Dodger, Akira thought. We're burning up out here. The heat was scalding them, cooking them. Behind her, Akira could hear Hildy sobbing. Akira, tell him to go, her father cried. We have to move, Akira's mom yelled. I know, Akira thought. She felt the flames growing hotter and taller as the seconds ticked away, but she didn't know what to do. Akira was just about to give up when she noticed Dodger's ears. They were focused in on a big redwood up ahead. The tree was on fire, but so was everything else. There didn't seem to be anything special about it. Akira didn't understand. The path ahead of them looked safe, at least as far as she could see, but Dodger was telling her they couldn't keep going on like they had before. Like when all those animals ran by us on the way down the mountain and I didn't listen, Akira thought. Or when I try to tell Dad about climate change and he refuses to hear it, she realized with a start. If Akira kept her blinders on, she ignored Dodger and pushed on despite his signals, she would be as bad as her dad. Dodger was trying to warn her, the same way the Earth was trying to warn them when the monarch stepped burned. Something is wrong here. Danger. Change course. Akira thought again about the unspoken connection she and Dodger shared. She didn't know what Dodger said and his horse sense knew, but Dodger trusted her, and she had to trust him back. Okay, Dodger, you've got the reins, she said, letting them go slack. Tell us where we need to go. Dodger understood, and without another moment's hesitation, he turned and plunged off the trail into the burning woods. Changing course. Without the dirt trail underneath them, Akira, her father, and Dodger were completely engulfed in flames. Fire licked at Akira's jeans, her shirt, her hands, her face. Behind them, Hildy screamed. Elwood had followed Dodger into the inferno. Akira, her father cried, what are you doing? Why did you leave the path? We're going to die out here. Shoom! Akira flinched as something exploded with devastating force behind them. Dodger spooked and ran deeper into the burning woods, but Akira caught a glimpse over her shoulder of what it was that had frightened them. It was the redwood Dodger had been so focused on. The tree had spontaneously combusted, just like the one that had separated her and Sue from their dads, blowing apart from the inside like someone had set off a bomb. As she watched, the top of the tree that hadn't exploded settled down on itself, and crick, crack, shoom, fell right down on the trail, covering it in flaming wreckage. If they hadn't kept going down that path, if Akira hadn't listened to what Dodger was trying to tell her, they would all be dead. Now they needed to not die in the fire. Hiya! Akira cried, kicking Dodger's sides. He was already galloping full tilt through the burning woods, but she wanted to let him know she was with him now, fully and completely. There was no turning back, no slowing down. Akira felt her clothes melting into her skin, felt the exposed parts of her skin blistering. Her father clung to her so tight she could barely breathe. Were her mother and Hildy still behind them? She hoped so, but couldn't look back. Akira held the reins, but it was Dodger who was taking the lead now, running on terror and instinct. She didn't even know if they were still headed toward the lake. All she could do was spur Dodger on faster and faster. A wall of fire rose in front of them, and Akira put her head down and slapped her heels against Dodger's side. Go, boy, go! She cried, not knowing if he could hear her. It didn't matter. She knew he understood. Whoosh! For a white hot moment, they were engulfed in flames, and Akira had the sense that every inch of her was on fire, that this was it, that she was going to end up like the people in the cars, the black mummy buried in the ash of the mountain forest she loved so much. Then suddenly, woof, they burst out of the fire, and the ground fell away, and Akira went flying off her horse. Taking the plunge, Akira flailed her arms and legs, swimming in midair for a long, weightless moment until, shoom, Akira plunged into the iciest, coldest water she'd ever felt. The shock of it took her breath away. Water flooded into her mouth, her nose, her eyes, wrapped her up in its icy fingers, and pulled her down, 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 until she thumped to the rocky bottom of the lake. Akira kicked back up and burst from the frigid water, gasping and coughing. She spun as she treaded water, looking desperately for her father, her mother, her sister. Her mother came up first, then her father, with Hildy in his arms. They were alive, and there were Dodger and Elwood. swimming along as calm as could be, like they were taking a dip after a hot afternoon on the trail. Akira laughed through a sob. Dodger had done it. He'd led them safely to the lake. Akira turned back to look at the forest up above them. The ground ended with a 6 foot drop off into the water. That's where they had gone flying. Everything beyond that point was a raging inferno of burning trees and black smoke and towering flames. That was what they had come through, what they would have been trapped in if Dodger and Elwood hadn't seen them through it and taken the plunge. Akira could barely get her arms and legs to move, but together she and her family swam for the little island in the middle of the lake. Dodger and Elwood got there first, splashing their way up the shore, rocky beach, and shaking themselves off like dogs. Akira and her mother followed close behind, and they helped pull her father and Hildy on shore. When all four of them were safe, they collapsed near the edge of the water, hugging and crying and shivering violently from the cold. Across the black water, the dark mountainside was orange with fire. As Akira watched, red embers floated out over the lake like fireflies. It might have been pretty, she thought, if it wasn't also devastating. The glowing embers drifted down slowly, gently, dying sizingly deaths on the surface of the water, and Akira got a sinking feeling in her stomach. All it would take was a strong gust of wind to carry more embers all the way to their little island. We are not safe, Akira said, her teeth chattering. Not even here. She couldn't believe it. If they weren't safe from the fire here on an island in the middle of a lake, where would they ever be safe? On the moon? We're going to die of hypothermia before that, her mother said, still shivering uncontrollably. Akira heard something thrumming above the roar and crackle of the wildfire, and she looked up. Against the smoky, moonlit sky, she saw a big two-rotor helicopter. It was coming down low to dip a big hanging bucket into the lake. Akira had seen Cal Fire using similar buckets to drop water on the fire. Akira forced her legs to work and ran out into the freezing water. She jumped and waved her arms and yelled, and Hildy and her mother and father joined her. Akira was afraid the pilot wouldn't see them in time, but then a bright light on the helicopter clicked on and a spot lighted them. Akira and her family whooped and hugged each other with relief, and Dodger and Elwood pranced around them. The horses didn't understand what was going on, but we're happy their people were happy. Stay where you are, the pilot said over a loudspeaker. We'll come back and get you and the horses. Akira wrapped her shivering arms around Dodger's head and put her face next to his. You hear that, Dodger? You're going to fly in a helicopter. Dodger whinnied and muscled her face. Akira loved him so much. She was so glad she'd listened to what he was trying to tell her on the path. The helicopter flew away, and Akira could hear the wildfire again roaring and popping across the water. Morris was trying to tell them something too. He was saying that what was happening in the Sierra Nevada and everywhere else wasn't normal, that it wasn't part of the normal cycle of nature. Akira's dad didn't want to hear that. She watched him hugging her mother and sister, and she sighed, feeling the familiar tug of war in her heart. Akira loved her father. He was a good dad, and he cared about these mountains as much as she did, but he was dead wrong about what was happening to the world and what was causing it. Akira hadn't said or done anything about climate change because she didn't want to ruin her relationship with her dad. But that wasn't her problem, she realized now. It was his. Akira didn't need to argue with her dad about climate change. She just needed to do what she knew was right. If her father didn't like that, that was on him, because she wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. Climate change was real, and it was here, and Akira had to do something about it. Churchill, Manitoba, Part 6. Caught in a bear trap. Owen looked around at their cold, cylindrical prison. A metal door locked one end shut, and a metal grate covered the other. There was no way out. Owen shook his head. He'd been doing so well, paying more attention, until now. I'm sorry, Owen said. I panicked. George put a hand on Owen's shoulder. No, man, I'm the one who crawled inside the bear trap. I wasn't thinking either. What did I expect Nanak to do? Leave us alone? A deep thrum vibrated through the bear trap. Thump, 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 and Owen felt a fresh rush of hope. He knew that sound. Everyone in Churchill did. It was a helicopter. Probably the DNR, out on polar bear patrol. Owen and George crowded the metal grate. The helicopter was still a ways off, but they could see its searchlight cutting through the darkness, illuminating the falling snow. Had their parents sent the DNR out to look for them when Owen and George hadn't checked in? George and Owen yelled and tried to work their hands through the squares in the grate to wave, but the holes were too small and the rotors were too loud, and a few minutes later the helicopter thundered away without even knowing they were there. George cursed and Owen sagged. This momentary excitement had taken Owen's mind off the cold, but now he felt the wind and snow coming right down the metal pipe. Owen shivered uncontrollably. George felt it too, shuddering and folding it on himself to conserve heat. If we don't get out of here, the DNR is going to find frozen mac and cheese when they make their morning rounds, Owen said through chattering teeth. Come on, let's try the door. Together they crawled to the other end of the metal pipe, but there was no way for them to get at the crank that opened the trap door from the inside. The only other thing they found was a small door cut into the metal pipe and reattached with hinges. Owen guessed it was there for people outside the trap to be able to shoot the bear inside with a tranquilizer. Hey, it's open, Owen said, lifting the little door with its hand, and it's just big enough for one of us to squeeze through. But where's Nanak? George whispered. Owen crawled to the grate at the back again and scanned the dark, snowy tundra. He turned to George and shook his head. He didn't see Nanak anywhere. They waited, sitting as still as and quiet as they could, but they heard nothing. Do you think he's gone? George whispered. No. Do you think he's gone? Owen whispered. George shook his head. Neither of them was buying it. Nanak was too clever, too persistent. It was a trick. It had to be. But where was he? There was nothing else for it. One of them was going to have to stick his head out the access hatch and take a look. Arctic Ninja. Owen pulled off one of his mittens and held up a fist, and George immediately understood and did the same. They shook their fists in unison. 1, 2, 3, shoot! Owen kept his first tight for a rock, and George covered it with paper. Owen rolled his eyes. They put their fists up again. 1, 2, 3, shoot! Owen threw scissors, and George smashed them with a rock. Owen cursed silently, and George smirked. George always won at rock, paper, scissors. George scooted out of the way, and Owen crouched underneath the access hatch. He put his mitten back on, took a deep breath, and pushed the hatch up very, very slowly. When nothing happened, he squeezed his eyes shut and stuck the top of his head out of the hole. He expected Nanak to be right outside, waiting to play whack-a-mole with his head, but nothing happened. Owen opened his eyes. It was dark out and snowing harder than before, but he could see a few meters in every direction. There was no sign of Nanak. It was like he had disappeared into thin air. Wasn't that one of the Inuit stories about Nanak? Owen thought. He was beginning to believe it. Owen dropped back inside. I don't see him anywhere, he whispered. Then we should go, George said. Owen shook his head. Something about this wasn't right. No, not yet, he said. George frowned. Owen, Nanak knows he can't get the last sprinkles out of the can, and now he's gone. It's freezing. You're bleeding. I can't see straight, and we're right outside of town. We have to get out of here and get to the health center. Owen sat back down. No, you said it yourself. I don't think. George looked even paler than he did before. Owen, I'm sorry I said all that stuff in the insult contest. But you were right about everything, Owen said. It's like I see things, but I don't think about what they mean. I've got to pay better attention. I've got to think about the big picture. Owen, I support your personal growth goals, said George, but do you have to start now? What is there to think about here? Polar bears can't disappear into thin air, no matter what the Inuit stories say, Owen told him. So where did he go? Underneath the trap? George tried. But they both shook their heads. Nanak was too big for that. No, polar bears are Arctic ninjas, remember? Owen said. So what do ninjas do? Sneak around on rooftops, kill people with throwing stars, hide in plain sight, said George. Hide in plain sight, thought Owen. He and George had the same thought at once, and their eyes went wide and their mouths formed O's of surprise and admiration. He's out there in the snow with his paw covering his nose, Owen whispered. Chillin' in Churchill. Hidden in plain sight, George and Owen had seen Nanak do it before from the rooftop. That had to be what he was doing now. If they crawled through that hole right now, he'd be all over them in seconds, and they would have nowhere to hide. George put up a mittened fist, and Owen tapped it. That's pretty good thinking for a white boy, George told him. Thank you, Owen said with a smile. Now they just had to wait Nanak out, and hope they didn't freeze to death first. Owen and George settled in near the grate at the back. The metal was bitterly cold against Owen's back, even though his clothes and the icy wind blowing through it threatened to turn him into a popsicle. George sat straight across from him, arms wrapped around himself and shuddering so hard Owen could hear his teeth rattle. Sure you don't want to give up all this? Owen asked George. George let out a little laugh. Yeah, I mean, I don't need to be hunted across the tundra by a polar bear or go camping with you in a bear trap in the middle of a snowstorm ever again. But I'd still like to stay in Churchill, and I'm going to tell my parents that if we ever get out of here. Owen nodded and smiled. Out of the corner of his eye, Owen caught the slightest hint of movement out in the snow. He grabbed George's foot and pointed. Together they watched as Nanak took his white paw off his black nose and stood up, shedding snow. Owen and George silently boxed each other in excitement. They were right. That turd burglar had been sitting just a few meters away from them the whole time, pulling his toddler peekaboo trick. But Nanak had run out of patience at last, and now he was turning and walking away into the snow. Dude, George whispered. I know, mac and cheese for the win. Owen said, Let's get out of here, George said. No, wait, said Owen. Not again. Owen, there's nothing to think about now. Nanak is gone, George told him. No, no, we're going, Owen said. I just want to take something with us first. Dead meat. It was dark and cold, and the snow swirled around them, making it hard to see. But Owen and George were out of the bear trap, and their fate was in their own hands, and that fate was a big hunk of stinky meat. Owen held the raw meat from the bear trap as far away from him as he could and turned his head away. That meat was stringy and gray with little streaks of pink in it, and it reeked like roadkill. Ugh, I think I just became a vegetarian, George whispered. Owen hoped the hunk of meat would keep Nanak busy long enough for them to stagger back to town without running into him again. Together they pushed the stinky thing up on top of the bear trap where Nanak could see it and reach it. Neither of them knew how to reset the bear trap, and Nanak was probably too smart to go inside it anyway. Smarter than they'd been, at least. There you go, buddy, Owen said when they were done. I know you're really hungry. Eat this instead of us. Okay, how do we tell him the meat's here? George asked. I mean, I know he can smell things miles away, but how do we know he's not headed for some trash can in town? Nanak, Owen bellowed, banging on the side of the metal trap like it was a dinner bell. Nanak, dinner time. Come and get it. George slung the shotgun over his shoulder and dragged Owen away by his parka. Are you nuts? George whispered. I meant, how are we going to let him know the meat's here once we're gone? You're going to get us killed. What? Owen said as they ran. You know he's going to come back. Nanak always comes back. Now, there's something else for him to eat. Unless the meat's the appetizer and we're the main course, said George. Owen and George limped along on three legs again, breathing hard and not talking as they skirted the edge of a frozen lake. If they had to stop one more time, Owen wasn't sure he could get back up and start again. They had to get to town now, or it was all over. Thump, 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 thump. Owen and George looked at each other in panic. That thumping, it sounded just like a polar bear running across the snow, but they'd left food out for him. Why hadn't Nana gone for the meat first? Or had he already scarfed it down and was now following the two boys who were bleeding and smelled like raw meat? Owen shook his head. What an idiot he'd been. So much for paying attention and thinking big picture. Owen staggered, throwing off their three-legged rhythm. He and George stumbled, slipped, and fell down face first into the snow. Ugh! Owen cried. He was tired and hurt and about to be run down by a polar bear, and now he had slushy, freezing snow down his pants, too. The sound got closer. Thump, 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 thump. Owen and George looked at each other with surprise and relief as they realized what they were hearing. That wasn't the sound of a polar bear. It was the sound of a helicopter. The last cracker shell. There was a helicopter somewhere right above them, but they couldn't see it in the snowstorm, and that meant it couldn't see them. Now! Shoot the last cracker shell, now! Owen yelled over the sound of the blades. What? No, there's no bear, George cried. But maybe the helicopter will hear it, Owen told him. Then they'll know where we are, and they can rescue us. No one could see George doing the math in his head. What if they don't hear us? He yelled. What if Nana comes back and we need that last cracker shell? Owen looked away. George could be right. What if he was just seeing what was in front of him and not the big picture? Like when he watched the weather lady set pond bubbles on fire without thinking about what that meant for the rest of the world. Or how he'd only seen dollar signs in the melting sea ice, not the threat to the polar bears. The thumping of the helicopter was starting to sound like it was going away from them. They had to make a choice. Owen shook his head. It was dangerous to not pay attention and not think about the big picture, but it was equally dangerous to finally understand what was going on and not do something about it. Maybe worse. Do it, George, Owen cried. Do it now. George nodded. Owen put his mittened hands over his ears, and George pulled the trigger. Pacow! The cracker shell was loud up close, but was it loud enough for the helicopter to hear over the sound of its own rotor? Owen wished they had a flare. The helicopter would definitely have seen that, but their flares were at the bottom of a lake, along with George's snowmobile. Owen held his breath. He and George listened and watched the sky, hoping that any second now, a helicopter would burst out of the snowstorm and see them. Thump, 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 thump. It sounds like it's getting closer, George yelled over the echoing blades. Then where is it? Owen yelled back. George shrugged. Maybe it's circling us. The boys helped pull each other to their feet, and Owen spun around, searching the dark clouds for the helicopter. Where are you? He thought. I can hear you, but I can't see you. Movement caught Owen's eye. He spun excitedly, only to have his heart catch in his throat. George! Owen cried. A polar bear was walking straight toward them out of the snowstorm. George raised the gun and then sagged and lowered it as he remembered. Nanak was back, and they had fired their last cracker shell, trying to signal a helicopter that wasn't coming. Say good night. Nanak had come back. Nanak always came back. The big polar bear started to circle them, but they couldn't retreat any farther. They had a frozen lake behind them. Think, Owen told himself. He ran through all the polar bear facts he'd memorized for the Tundra Buggy tour, but none of them helped here. The only one that came to him now was, if it's brown, lie down. If it's black, fight back. If it's white, say good night. But I don't want to say good night, thought Owen. George wrapped Owen's injured arm in his and waved the shotgun, trying to look big. Get, Bear. Go on, George yelled. Owen waved his other arm. Go away, Nanak. Nanak kept circling, kept coming closer. Owen and George inched as far back against the frozen lake as they could go. Owen briefly considered stepping out into the lake, but even if it didn't crack, a slippery block of ice was nowhere he wanted to be while trying to get away from a polar bear. Hey, hey, Owen yelled, just trying to make noise. We're the ones who left the meat out for you, George called. We're your friends. Yeah, I think he wants us to feed him again, said Owen. Only we're the food now. Nanak opened his big mouth and made a popping sound as he cricked his neck. He was getting ready to rush them, and they both knew it. George held up the silver shotgun like a stick, and Owen looked around frantically for somewhere they could hide, but there was nowhere to go. Thump, 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 thump. Owen and George ducked as the helicopter burst out of the snowstorm behind them and flew right overhead. Its bright searchlight found the two boys first, then swung toward Nanak. The polar bear turned his head away from the light, but he stood his ground. Owen felt like jumping for joy and collapsing to his knees all at the same time. They were saved. A man in a Department of Natural Resources uniform leaned out of the helicopter with a hunting rifle in his hands, and the bottom fell out of Owen's stomach. He broke away from George and waved his hands, trying to get the man's attention. No, Owen yelled. Don't kill him. Suddenly, George was beside him, waving the shotgun in the air. Don't shoot! Don't shoot! He cried. The man in the helicopter didn't see them, or didn't care. Two puffs of smoke erupted from the barrel of the gun. Pack, pack! And Nanak stumbled and fell. Connected. The shots from the helicopter were like bullets in Owen's heart. He fell to his knees in the snow, tears streaming down his cheeks. He didn't want Nanak to hurt him or George, but he didn't want Nanak to die either. It's not his fault, Owen sobbed. George grabbed his shoulder and pointed. Owen, it's not bullets, he yelled over the sound of the helicopter's rotors. It's tranquilizer darts. Owen looked and saw two silvery white tubes with bright red tufts on the end sticking out of Nanak's side. The darts wobbled as the big bear stood up and lumbered away from the helicopter. They're just putting him to sleep to take him to polar bear jail, George told him. Owen nodded with relief. He was embarrassed that he'd gotten so emotional, but he felt connected to Nanak now. He couldn't stand the thought of him dying, especially if he was the reason the polar bear was killed. George helped Owen to his feet. A few meters away, Nanak was starting to feel the effects of the tranquilizer dart, and he paced around like his brain was getting foggy. The helicopter hovered, waiting for the polar bear to pass out. Nanak suddenly seemed to catch a second wind, and he charged straight at Owen and George again. There was no time for them to do anything but cling to each other and cry out. He's so fast, Owen thought. The DNR officer's rifle barked again. Pack, pack, but Nanak was already on top of them. Owen and George dove together into the snow, and Nanak ran right past them onto the lake. Of course, thought Owen. Nanak was frightened and hurt just like they were, and now he was doing what they'd been doing all along, running home. For Nanak, that was out onto the ice, onto the water, where the polar bear was king. Owen and George watched as Nanak lopped out onto the snow-covered lake, and crick, crack, splash, the thin ice broke underneath him, and he dropped into the water. Owen breathed a sigh of relief for him and George, and for Nanak. It was over. Or was it? Owen frowned. Something about this wasn't right. Think, Owen told himself. What's wrong with what I'm seeing? Owen looked away, playing the scenario forward in his head. Nanak was tranked, and he was going to lose consciousness before the helicopter could land and the DNR officers could fish him out of the lake. Polar bears were great swimmers, but they couldn't breathe underwater. If Nanak was still in the water when he passed out and the DNR couldn't get to him in time, Owen gasped. George, Owen cried, Nanak is going to drown. Save the polar bears. Without saying a word to each other, George and Owen ran straight out onto the lake, their boots crashing through the thin ice and into the freezing water. Stop! A voice boomed from the helicopter's loudspeaker. Get out of the water. The bear is still moving. Good, George cried. It's not his fault, Owen yelled, even though there was no way the helicopter could hear them. He and George understood, though. They couldn't let Nanak die. They were the ones who'd invaded his world, not the other way around. Owen tried to pick up his feet as he splashed out next to Nanak, but his big boots and snow pants were already full of water. He staggered, tripped, and fell hands first into the icy lake. Oh, Owen, you dumb ice, Owen yelled, popping back up again. Oh, that is cold. George fell down on his knees on the other side of the polar bear. Hoo, 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 he huffed as the freezing water filled his pants. Nanak didn't feel the cold, but that wasn't what was going to kill him. The polar bear was so big that he sat on the bottom of the lake, half in, half out of the water. He pawed sluggishly at the floating ice like he wanted to go even deeper, but the tranquilizers were already taking effect. His eyelids drooped and his head sank below the surface. Air bubbles blooped up from his mouth and nose. Get out of the water, the loudspeaker boomed again, but Owen and George ignored it. George, we have to get him turned around and pull him up on shore, Owen cried. The initial shock of the ice water had worn off, and now even part of Owen was on fire with the kind of burn you only felt from a bitter, bone deep cold. He and George pushed and tugged on Nanak with shaking, juddering hands, trying first to get him turned around and then to pull him back to shore, but nothing was working. It's no use, George said with his teeth chattering. This dude weighs 500 kilos. We're never going to budge him. Nanuk's eyes were closed all the way now, and no more air bubbles were coming out of his nose. We have to get his head out of the water, said Owen. He stumbled forward on his knees. His lower legs dragged behind his huge chunks of ice. They probably were huge chunks of ice by now. Owen had never been so cold in his entire life and had grown up in Churchill, Manitoba, the polar bear capital of the world. Owen put his good arm around Nanuk's head and lifted. Even in the water, the polar bear's head weighed a ton. But then George was there on the other side of him, helping him lift. The two boys strained and grunted, and at last they were able to raise Nanuk's snout above the surface. A mix of water and snot blew out of the polar bear's nose like a fire extinguisher. His breath sounded heavy and labored, but Nanak was alive. Owen slid his frozen legs underneath Nanak's head, and George did the same, making a pillow for the polar bear to lie on. Ice cold and exhausted, the boys slumped over Nanak, their arms wrapped around him in a great big bear hug. Mac, 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 George said, saying Owen's nickname with every panting breath he let out. What is it, Cheese? Owen asked, panting just as hard. Look, George said, patting Nanak's head. I'm doing what you told me. I couldn't do on the tundra buggy. I'm petting a polar bear. It hurt to laugh, but Owen couldn't help it. He laughed so hard he cried, his tears freezing on his eyelashes. Owen thought back to the tundra buggy and the tourist who had asked about climate change. Owen had given him a careless answer and moved on to the fun stuff. But what if instead of telling the tourist a bunch of polar bear facts, he also talked about the melting ice and the crumbling permafrost and the mama bears losing their dens? Owen had people from all over the world on his family's tundra buggy. Why couldn't he show the visitors how awesome polar bears are and send them home fired up about saving them? Because what was happening in the Arctic couldn't stay in the Arctic. The whole world had to know. And if they saved the polar bears, maybe they could save the planet too. The helicopter landed, and two DNR officers ran toward them with a bear-sized stretcher. Nanek's eyes fluttered open for a second, and he let out an exhausted little huff. I know, man, I know, said Owen. You're going to be okay now, buddy, George said, patting the big bear's head again. Yeah, don't worry, Nanek, said Owen. We got you. Miami, Florida, Part 6. Brother's Keeper. Natalie and Patience paddled Patience's kayak through the quiet, flooded streets of Liberty City until they ran aground on dry pavement. Every part of Miami had been underwater during the hurricane, but most of Liberty City was a few feet higher than a lot of the other neighborhoods, which meant that as the water slowly receded, Liberty City emerged like an island from Lake Miami. Call it Liberty Island now, I guess, said Patience as they stepped out of the kayak. Churro rode like a king in a queen in the kayak as Patience and Natalie carried it between them, picking their way through downed trees and overturned cars and unidentifiable debris. Natalie watched with sympathy as people dragged broken furniture and ruined carpets and sodden drywall from their shattered homes in the 85-degree heat, tossing everything into growing junk piles in their yards. Natalie knew what heartbreaking, miserable work that was. She and her mother had done that same thing after Irma. It was like starting over every few years. Is there anything left to save in my house? Natalie wondered. Were people in her neighborhood doing the same thing right now? Or was Helia still underwater? Where were her mother and Tia Beatrice? Natalie took a deep breath and tried not to panic. There was no way to know. Not yet, at least. Like everybody else wanting to hear if their loved ones were okay, Natalie was just going to have to wait. Natalie and Patience came to a small cinder block building with a long line of people outside it. As they set the kayak down next to a big garage door, Patience explained that her community food bank had been an auto mechanic shop before she had taken it over. They used to change people's oil here, Patience told Natalie. Now we change people's lives. A sign up top read Brothers Keeper Food Pantry. We collect food and necessities and hand them out to people who need it, Patience explained. After Reuben, that's going to be almost everyone. Patience wasn't kidding. It looked to Natalie like everybody in Liberty City was in line for help. Black folks, white folks, Latino folks, Asian folks, young families and middle aged couples, and old people, and Patience seemed to know them all by name. Natalie stood awkwardly with Churro in her arms as patients moved through the crowd, shaking hands and hugging people and listening to their stories about how they had survived the storm and what they had lost. All right, patient said. I want to talk to all y'all here how you're doing, but let me get things opened up. Natalie followed patients inside and let Churro down on the floor. An older black woman was setting up a folding table, and she and patients hugged each other and got caught up on what happened to them during the storm, while Natalie and Churro explored Brother's Keeper. The small space was filled with floor to ceiling metal shelves. Some of the shelves held things like bottled water and baby diapers and cans of food, but a lot more of the shelves were empty. We handed stuff out to people ahead of the storm, but we saved some for after, Patience told Natalie. Nat, this is Nat's the one I was telling you about who washed up all the way from Hialeah. Come here, Latita said, and promptly wrapped Natalie up in her arms. I'm a hugger, Latita told her. Not gonna apologize for it. Okay, Natalie said as Churro circled them and barked. FEMA show up? Red Cross? Anybody from the city? Patience asked. No, not yet, Latita told her. Natalie remembered the ocean that surrounded Liberty Island. Until the water receded completely, the only help they were likely to get would be by boat or by helicopter. Looks like it's just us then, Patience told them. Let's get to work. Patience rolled up the big garage door, and Natalie saw even more people outside than there had been before. Letita sat at the table and took down people's names and addresses and what they needed. If Brother's Keeper had something to spare, Patience and Natalie went to the shelves and brought it back for them. Churro, meanwhile, had decided he liked Latita after all, and he climbed up in her lap and inspected everyone who came through the line. Hauling things back and forth was hot, sweaty work, but Natalie liked it. It felt good to be doing something, to be making a difference in people's lives. And it took her mind off her mom and Tia Beatrice. By midday, Brother's Keeper had handed out everything on the shelves, and there were even more people in line. All of them were trapped on Liberty Island with what little they'd been able to buy before the storm, and there was still no sign of help from the outside. I'm going to see if I can get cell phone service anywhere, Patience said. She picked up a clipboard and put it in Natalie's hands. You and Latita go down the line. Get people's names and addresses, phone numbers too, for when there's service again. Find out what they need and tell them we'll get it to them as soon as we can. Me? Natalie asked. Of course you, Patience said, turning her around and pushing her out the door. You see anybody else around here who's going to do it? Natalie stepped out into the bright sunshine. The eyes of every person in line instantly shifted to her and the clipboard in her hands. And Natalie gulped. Carrying bottles of water and diapers back and forth from the shelves was one thing, but talking to people, being responsible for making sure they got what they needed, that was a whole different thing. I'm just a seventh grader, and everybody else here is an adult, thought Natalie. Who's going to listen to me? Impatience. At first, nobody did listen to Natalie. The people of Liberty City surrounded her, talking over each other to tell her what had happened to them and where they lived and what they needed. Natalie didn't know where to look or who to listen to. It was too much. There were too many people, too many sad stories. There was no way Natalie was going to be able to help them all. At her feet, Churro added to the chaos by barking furiously. Everybody stop, Natalie yelled, and suddenly everyone went quiet, just like Hurricane Reuben had. Even Churro was surprised into silence. Maybe this is my superpower, Natalie thought, privately pleased with the idea. Listen, she said more quietly while all eyes and ears were on her. Everybody needs help, and everybody's going to get help. But we're only going to get through this if we work together, all right? So I need everybody to form a line behind this lady right here, and I promise I will talk to each and every one of you. The people looked at Natalie, then each other, and then amazingly, they all did what she told them to do and got into a single file line. Natalie almost couldn't believe it. Latita looked over at Natalie and winked. All right, you heard the girl, Latita hollered to the people who surrounded her. 2 lines, let's go. One by one, the people in Natalie's line told her what they needed. Food, bottled water, medicine, tampons, blankets, fans, clean water, clean underwear, dry socks, batteries, diapers, baby formula, hammers, nails, and plywood to repair their homes, rakes, brooms, sledgehammers, and saws to clean up their streets and yards. It was easy to feel overwhelmed by it all, but Natalie focused on doing what she could. The grocery store up on 12th Street is back open, but they can't take snap cards with the electricity out. A woman named Nevaeh told her, a toddler in her arms. SNAP stood for Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program. Natalie's mom called it food stamps. It's what the government gave out to people who worked jobs but still didn't make enough money to buy food. How am I supposed to eat in the meantime? Nevaeh asked. I don't get paid again till next week. Nobody's getting paid, the woman in line behind her said. Not anytime soon. Natalie realized she was right. It would take weeks, months for things to get back to normal, if they ever did. How would people survive until then? The story was the same all the way down the line, and Natalie's heart sank with each new name she added to the list. Each new thing someone needed, she had to flip over the pieces of paper and start using the backs to keep track of it all. Natalie felt her hope receding like the tide. When she'd been stuck on the boat in the storm, the lady with the two little kids had said everything would be all right, Manana. But she'd been wrong. It was tomorrow and everything was not all right. In many ways, it was worse. Do we have any infrastructure concerns? Natalie heard Patience yelling from inside Brother's Keeper. She sounded distinctly impatient. I've got hungry people down here, people without any clean water to drink. And you want to send construction crews? Natalie left her line to peek inside, and her heart leapt. Patience was on the phone. She had cell service. Natalie ran to her and clutched her arm. You don't get somebody down here with some food and fast. You're going to have infrastructure concerns, Patience told whoever was on the call. Churro didn't know why Patience was mad, but he stood beside her and growled menacingly on her behalf. Hello, Patience said. Hello. The other person either hung up or Patience had lost signal. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened her eyes again, she shook her head. That was FEMA, she told Natalie, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, city, state, federal government. They're all telling me the same thing. They can't get us food and water because they're too busy handling the emergency. How do they not see that this is the emergency? She gestured around them. We've got no electricity, no water, no food. I've got hundreds of hungry people and a whole warehouse sitting here empty. Did the government fill it up before the storm, like I asked them? No, they did not. Now, they tell me they can't get the food and water through the flooded streets. What did they think the city was going to look like after a hurricane? Natalie couldn't help but admire Patience all over again. She was out there every day, yelling into the storm, no matter how big and overwhelming it was. Patience let out a frustrated breath and then softened. Here, she said, handing Natalie the phone. I know you need to try your mom. Natalie took the phone carefully, almost reverently, and punched in her mom's number with shaking hands. Churro hopped around her as if sensing her nervousness. The phone rang and rang. Natalie felt her spirits dropping, and then someone answered. Take a walk. Mama, it's me, Natalie, she cried, but her mom's voice cut in on top of her. Hello, this is Elena Torres. I'm not able to answer my phone right now. Natalie bit back a sob as the rest of the voicemail message played. She felt her knees go weak, and she leaned against a metal shelf. Hey, it's me, Natalie said after the beep. Her voice quivered. I'm okay. I'm with a woman named Patience Davis in Liberty City. This is her phone. Call me back at this number if you get this. She paused, not knowing what else to say. I love you, and I hope you're okay, she added, and hung up. Tears streamed down her face as Patience took the phone back from her. It's okay, Nat, Patience said. She put an arm around her and let Natalie lean in and cry. She probably lost her phone in the storm like you. She'll call her voicemail when she's safe and see you've gotten in touch. Natalie sniffed back a sob. Patience was being nice, but they both knew what she wasn't saying, that there was every chance her mom would never call back because she had drowned in the storm along with her phone. Patience took Natalie's clipboard from her. You've been at this for a while now. I'll call the Red Cross, get you on their list of people. You take a break, go for a walk with the dog, so he's not growling at me every second in my own place of business. Natalie laughed through her tears. He's not my dog, she said, but a break sounded good. She and Churro left Brother's Keeper and explored the neighborhood. Natalie was glad to be alone for a little while, and Churro was happy to sniff at all the piles of trash and debris and to pee on everything. The rain had stopped, and the afternoon sky was bright blue, and the birds were chirping again. But everything, every tree, every electric pole, every car, every roof and window and wall was damaged or destroyed, and no one from the government had come out to start cleaning it up yet, or help all the desperate people who were staring at their broken homes with nothing to do and no way to fix anything. Natalie and Churro worked their way around a pile of broken tree branches. They turned a corner at a row of shops that was still standing, and suddenly a big white man in black military fatigues and a black mask stood in front of Natalie, holding an automatic rifle. Stop right there, the man said, his voice hard. Who are you, and what do you want? You loot, we shoot. Natalie froze as a second white man in a black uniform and a black mask came up behind the first. He had a huge rifle, too, and on pieces of tape stuck to his bulletproof vest, he'd written the words, You loot, we shoot. What are you doing here? The second man demanded. Churro growled at the man. Natalie scooped him up and hugged him close. I'm just walking my dog, Natalie said. Well, walk him somewhere else, the first man said. The men were standing in front of a shoe store, a liquor store, and a convenience store. The storm had broken all the windows and awnings, but as far as Natalie could see, nobody had taken anything from the shops. and tell everybody to stay away from these stores, or else, the second man said. Natalie frowned. Who did she know that was going to go looting stores? She nodded anyways, and hurried back the way she'd come, completely rattled. What were men with guns doing in Liberty City the day after a hurricane? On another street, a young Asian woman was using a long-handled squeegee to push water out the front door of a Chinese restaurant. Are you open? Natalie asked. The woman shook her head. Just cleaning up, she said. Natalie nodded to Churro. Got any scraps for a hungry dog? No, sorry, the woman said. We're not opening our freezer up until the last minute. If we open it now, the food will go bad that much faster. Probably going to lose all of it anyway. The woman brained. Oh, wait, we do have some dog treats, I think. She disappeared into the store and returned with a small plastic container of store-bought dog snacks. She handed the whole thing to Natalie. Here, she said, so you can keep giving him treats until things get back to normal. Whenever that is. Natalie thanked the young woman, gave Churro one of the treats, and headed for Patience's food pantry. Churro kept leaping up every few steps to beg for another treat, but Natalie shook her head. You can't have them all at once, she scolded Churro. Latita was still writing down people's information when Natalie returned, and Patience was hanging up on another frustrating phone conversation. Still no help coming, Patience told Natalie, and no word from your mom. I'm sorry. Natalie nodded. It had been too much to hope that her mom would call back while she was gone. There were soldiers out on the street, Natalie said. Maybe it's the army or something. Patience scoffed. Yeah, I heard, but they're not the army or the National Guard, and they're not the police. Vigilantes is what they are, she said. As far as anybody can tell, they don't even live here. They came in by boat to shoot people if they start looting stores. But did they bring food with them so people wouldn't need to steal? Water? First aid stuff? Dry clothes? No, just their guns. Natalie couldn't believe it. And they can shoot anybody they catch looting? She asked. Not legally, said Patience, but who's going to stop them? Natalie shook her head. She couldn't imagine somebody getting shot for stealing food or a pair of shoes or even a TV. That wasn't the way things were supposed to work. The Chinese restaurant down the street isn't reopening yet, but they gave me some dog treats for Churro, Natalie said, showing Patience the box. Natalie took pity on Churro and gave him one more treat before putting the plastic container on one of the empty shelves. Well, he's covered at least, Patience said as Churro ate happily. Patience's phone rang. She answered it with a tired sigh, but after a moment her eyes lit up and she smiled. Nat, Patience cried, it's your mom. Mama's story. Mama, Natalie cried when she heard her mother's voice on the phone. You are alive. I thought I would never hear your voice again. My angel, her mother said through sobs. Mama wanted to know everything that had happened to Natalie, and she wept as Natalie told her story. I can't believe you're alive, Mama said when Natalie was done. Hearing it all out loud again, Natalie couldn't believe it either. Mama's story was just as frightening. After Natalie had escaped, the water in their house had kept rising, pushing Mama and Tia Beatrice up toward the ceiling. But the storm surge was so powerful it had done what they couldn't and ripped the front door off its hinges. We took deep breaths, and I dragged Tia down through the open door, Mama said. I thought my lungs were going to burst, but we made it out and came up gasping for air. Reuben was raging all around us. I looked for you, but you were already gone. Natalie remembered being swept away by the storm. What a blur it had been. How fast. Natalie's heart broke, thinking about her mom and Tia Beatrice out in the storm and her not being there to help them. Reuben had dragged Mama and Tia Beatrice to Natalie's old elementary school up the street, and they had climbed in through one of the broken windows on the second floor and taken refuge in a stairwell. But Natalie, Mama said softly, Tia Beatrice, it was too much for her. She swallowed too much water. I did what I could, but before we could be rescued, oh, mija, I'm so sorry. Tia Beatrice is dead. Tia Beatrice. Natalie put a hand to her mouth. For the past day, she'd been worried her mamma and Tia Beatrice might be dead. Hearing her mother's voice again had given her hope, but now, to learn that the woman who had been like family to her was truly gone, Natalie bent double and sobbed. Patience put her arm around her and took the phone, letting Natalie cry. Natalie heard Patience talking to her mother, but Natalie was somewhere else. She was on the floor at Tia's apartment, cutting out blue construction paper butterflies for Mariposa while Tia's telenovelas played across the room. She was in Tia's lap, listening to her stories about face-changing witches defeated with mustard seeds and beautiful princesses sealed in caves by greedy suitors. She was in Tia's kitchen, helping her stir red beans and white rice and chopped onions on the stove. For Tia Beatrice, to have survived a hurricane in Nicaragua as a young woman and come all this way to the United States only to die in another storm, it wasn't fair. No one person should suffer so much loss. Natalie felt Patience's hand on her back, and she looked up. Her mother was on the phone for her again. I can't believe Tia Beatrice is gone, Natalie said, sniffling. I know, my angel, I know, her mother said. through her own tears. I can't talk much longer now. I'm safe in a shelter in Hialeah, but there are other people here who need to use this phone, and we only have one generator for power. I've spoken with your friend Patience. She says you can stay with her for now. Are you all right with that? Yes, Natalie told her. Good, her mother said. Stay in Liberty City then, and I will come to you when I can. Do you understand? I love you, Mija. You've been very brave. They lingered another few moments over their goodbyes, and then they had to go. Natalie gave the phone back to Patience, and Churro crawled up into Natalie's lap, sensing her despair. Little Churro, how would he understand when he never saw Tia Beatrice again? Would he always be wondering where she was? Natalie took the plastic treat container from the shelf. Just one more, she told him. We'll save the rest for any other dogs that come by so they can have one too. I'm glad your mom's okay, Patience said, sitting down next to Natalie. Sounds like they're getting some help in Hialeah, at least. She lifted the heavy clipboard in her hand. Me, I got a long, long list of people who need stuff, and FEMA and the city government are still AWOL. I already ran out of all the money I took out of the ATM before Ruben got here, and I don't know who else to call. Not even 911 is answering anymore. Natalie remembered Tia Beatrice saying something similar about the first hurricane she survived in Nicaragua, but there hadn't been any government to help them after the Civil War, so they'd banded together, shared what they had with each other. It hadn't been enough in the long run, but it had helped them survive until they could get out, go someplace better. Churro barked at the treat container, wanting another. Natalie wasn't going to give in to him, but she was starting to get an idea. You keep asking people in the neighborhood what they need, Natalie said, thinking out loud. What if we went around instead and asked anybody what they have? Patience sat up. You mean like the treats? Like, does someone have a lot of meat that's going to spoil? And does somebody else have a girl? Natalie said, nodding. Or more bottled water than they can drink, or ice that's going to melt. People may not have much, but if everybody puts what they have together, Patience wrapped Natalie up in a hug. Nat, you're a genius, Patience cried. Take this clipboard and go knock on some doors. What do you have? In the parking lot outside Brother's Keeper, hamburgers and hot dogs sizzled on the grill, and rice and beans cooked in big pots over a fire pit built with cinder blocks. The smell of a good food had brought people from all over the neighborhood, and they stood around eating and talking and laughing as the sun went down on Liberty City. And all because Natalie and Patience had stopped asking people what they needed and started asking them what they had to share. Not that everybody they'd asked had been helpful. The first person they talked to had flat out refused to share what he had and shut the door in their faces. Natalie had been devastated, but Patience was undeterred. The next apartment belonged to a young family with a baby, and peeking inside, Natalie could see they didn't have much. She was sure they would be another no. What could they possibly share? But Natalie's heart caught in her throat as the young mother went and got a package of diapers and handed it to Patience. We should have enough until the stores open back up, the woman told them. You make sure some mama that needs these get them. Natalie got choked up, but Patience didn't have time for getting sentimental. At the next apartment, a family gave them bottled waters. At the next, a man gave them 2 packages of hot dog buns. Almost everywhere they went, people had something to donate. When a teenage boy came to a door and said he didn't have anything to share, Patience took all the things Natalie had been carrying and shoved them into his arms. You don't have something to give, you can work, she told him, and soon they had a small army of people hauling food and supplies back to the warehouse on foot. Now the shelves were full, and people had come to help distribute things. One table handed out bags of chips and bottles of water and apples and bananas. Another table gave out diapers and formula. A really talented teenage girl sat on a stool and played songs on her acoustic guitar, and 2 men brought their girls and were trying to outdad each other with their cooking and their bad jokes. The tasty aromas had brought some of their neighborhood's dogs, too. Natalie gave them each a treat, even though Churro growled at every one of them. Natalie smiled at Tia Beatrice's dog. There was still a hole in her heart that might never heal, but doing what Tia Beatrice would have done, helping other people, took some of the sting away from losing her. Natalie suddenly recognized somebody standing in line and felt a fire rise up in her. She grabbed Patience by her arm and pointed. Look, it's that man from the first apartment we went to. He wouldn't share anything he had, and now he's standing in line to get food other people donated. And he's welcome to, Patience said, shocking Natalie. Patience shrugged. Some people are always going to take without giving, she said. I'm always going to give without taking. Natalie was in awe all over again at the way Patience thought about the world. How can I be like that when I grow up? Natalie wondered. People like him aren't nearly the worst of our troubles now, anyway, Patience said with a sigh. What do you mean? Natalie asked. Come on, said Patience. There's enough people helping out here. Let's you and me go up on the roof. Magic City. I like to come up here and think, Patience told Natalie as they climbed up a ladder on the back side of Brother's Keeper. Patience carried a tote bag with cans of soda and a bag of chips for them to share, and Natalie carried Churro. She thought he'd like seeing lots more things he could bark at. I used to have a couple of lawn chairs up here, Patience said. I guess they're all the way to Orlando by now. She and Natalie sat on the edge of the roof, looking down at all the people laughing and eating. Natalie thought they'd done something good, but Patience seemed unhappy. What's wrong? Natalie said. Was this a bad idea or something? No, no, Nat, Patience said, seeing her frown. I'm sorry. It's great that everybody pitched in to help each other. But what you see down there is the last of the good times. Everybody in Liberty City has already given all they can. When all that food and water and stuff is gone, that's it. We've got nothing else. And then what? Natalie hadn't thought about that. She'd felt so good about bringing people together, so good about helping, but Patience was right. It wasn't enough. Patience scrolled through a news feed on her phone. So much is gone, she said. The Keys got flattened. Bunch of buildings came down in Miami. All those marinas along the coast destroyed. Port of Miami, Miami Airport, both gone. Brickell Financial District is flooded. Coral Gables looks like Venice. Freedom Tower's gone. Sawgrass Mills is part of the Everglades now. She shook her head. Reuben wrecked Fort Lauderdale, too. Port Everglades, the fishing pier at Bompano, it's all gone. Basketball arena made it through. So there's that, I guess. Natalie wondered about Hialeah. It wasn't as high up as Liberty City and would still be underwater. What did her house look like now? Was it even there anymore? Patience reached across Natalie for a potato chip, and Churro growled at her. Okay, Churro, Patience said, holding up her hands. I'm not going to hurt your girl. Churro pranced in a circle in Natalie's lap, smug with a victory, then settled down and closed his eyes. Natalie stared down at him. When had she and Diablito become friends? Patience shook her head and laughed. That dog of yours hates everybody but you. He's not my. Natalie started to say, but she had to stop herself. Tia Beatrice was gone. Churro had nowhere to go. I guess you are my dog now, Natalie told him. She scratched Churro between the ears, and he gurgled approvingly. In the distance, electric light glowed from the windows of the tall condos that had survived the hurricane. I see they got the power back on down in Brickell, Patience said with disgust. Glad the rich people were first on the list. Needed the power to run their juicers and exercise bikes, I guess. Natalie thought about Shannon in her high rise apartment with its own generator. Shannon, who was only worried about how Reuben was going to ruin her Halloween, whose father called staying in Miami through the hurricane a camping adventure. Natalie couldn't imagine her and Shannon going back to being friends when this was all over. Shannon was a nice person, but it was like the two of them lived on different planets. Patience shook her head. They call Miami the Magic City, she said, but it's only magic for some of the people who live here. It's not real magical for the rest of us. When I was little, I made up a magical world called Mariposa, Natalie said. She blushed a little to say it out loud, but it was easier to talk about it up here as night was falling, while she and Patience were looking out over the ruined city. She told Patience about Mariposa's houses and parks, its libraries and hospitals, the way the people looked out for each other and their world. In Mariposa, the king and the queen made sure everybody got what they needed, Natalie said, and everybody was happy. Patience nodded. Sounds like a place I'd very much like to live, she said. Churro's head perked up, and he started to growl at something down below. Somebody new was coming into the parking lot and causing a stir. What's all this now? Patience asked. Natalie worried it was the fake army men come to give them all a hard time, but these people didn't have guns. They had a camera equipment. Natalie gasped as she recognized a tall, pretty Latina woman in jeans and a blue windbreaker. Patience! I know who that is, Natalie cried. It's Maria Martinez from TV. A great story. And you run a community food pantry? Maria Martinez asked Patience, the camera lights bright in the dark parking lot? Yes, said Patience. Even before the hurricane, Brothers Keeper collected donations and distributed food and clothing and other necessities to the folks in our community who needed them the most. Natalie stood just out of the circle of light, watching the interview. The news station had seen what was going on in the Brothers Keeper parking lot while flying drones over the city, and Miami's famous meteorologist had come by motorboat to Liberty Island to talk to everyone. She'd already interviewed the girl dads and the girl with the guitar and a bunch of people who'd stood in line for food. Natalie was so excited. Not only did she get to see Maria Martinez live and in person, but people all over were going to see what was going on here, what was happening here. Liberty City was finally going to get the help it needed. Can you tell us more about how all this came together today? Maria asked Patience. Patience explained how they'd gone around and asked everyone what they could share, and how people had given what they could. even when they didn't have much to begin with. And it was all Nat's idea, Patience said. She turned and gestured for Natalie to join her. Natalie's stomach dropped. She shook her head and backed away. She couldn't go on camera. She hadn't showered in 2 days. Her hair was a frizzy mess, and she was wearing hand-me-down clothes that were 5 sizes too big. She was dirty and sweaty and tired. Natalie didn't like having her picture taken under normal circumstances, and she was most certainly did not want anybody she knew to see her looking like this. Patience grinned and pulled her into the light. "This is Natalie Torres," said Patience. "She's the one who made all this happen." Natalie was mortified. She tried desperately to pull her hair back into a bun and was sure she'd just made it worse. "Hi, Natalie," said Maria Martinez. "Tell us a little more about yourself. What grade are you in, and what school do you go to?" Natalie blinked in the bright lights of the camera. She was standing right next to Maria Martinez. "Hi," Natalie said. Patience and the people watching all laughed, but not in the mean way. "Hi, Natalie," Maria Martinez said, again smiling. "How old are you, and what school do you go to?" Maria Martinez had asked her something, but for the life of her, Natalie couldn't remember what it was. "I watch you all the time on TV," Natalie told her. "I'm a big fan." Everybody laughed again, and Maria Martinez laughed with them. "Well, I'm a big fan of you and what you and Patience have accomplished today," Maria said. She turned to the cameraman. "It's a heartwarming example of what a community can do when people pull together to help each other. I'm Maria Martinez, Miami News, Channel 5. The bright lights cut off, and suddenly the parking lot was dark again. "Thanks. Nice job here today, everybody. It's a great story," Maria Martinez told them as she and her camera crew began to pack up to leave. Natalie blinked, still seeing stars. "Wait, that's it?" she said. Maria Martinez turned. "Is there more to it?" she asked. "Well, yeah," Natalie said. She remembered what she and Patience had talked about up on the roof. "What do you think things are going to be like here tomorrow, when all this food and water and stuff is gone?" she asked. "Tell me," Maria said. She turned to her cameraman and signaled for him to start recording again. Click! The blinking light hit Natalie in the face, and she turned away. No, no, no. She couldn't do this. She couldn't look up into those lights and talk to Maria Martinez on camera. Natalie looked up at Patience in desperation. What was she supposed to do? What was she supposed to say? Different boats. "You got this, Nat," Patience said. "You can do this." Natalie shook her head. This wasn't her. She couldn't talk on camera. Churro sensed her panic and stood at her side and growled. "Just forget about the camera and talk to me," Maria told her. "Natalie, it looks like everything's great here. The people of Liberty City came together and they're sharing what they have and grilling out and listening to music. How is that not good?" "It is good," Natalie said. She tried to forget the camera was recording her and looked at Maria instead. "You're right," Natalie went on. "This is amazing. What happened here today? There were so many people here in Liberty City who didn't have enough food after the hurricane, enough water, all the other things they need to survive. There was no way we could help them all. And we didn't know what to do. It was too much. So you got people to come together and share what they had," Maria prompted her. Natalie nodded. "But it's not going to be enough," she told Maria. "People don't have any more to give. Tomorrow, they're going to be hungry again, and it doesn't fix the bigger problem." "What's the bigger problem?" Maria asked. "You know, you talk about it all the time," Natalie told Maria. "It's climate change." Natalie felt her pulse quicken as she came back to her old, familiar topic. "We're always going to have hurricanes, but climate change is making them worse, and it affects different people in different ways. Look at those skyscrapers," she said, pointing at the sparkling lights in the darkness. "The only lights in all of Miami. Most of those rich people, they already got out of town, but they're still the first ones to get their power back. When is Liberty City going to get its power back, or Hialeah, or Overtown, or Little Haiti? People say we're all in the same boat with climate change, but we're not. Some people get to ride out the storm in yachts, while the rest of us are clinging to water, whatever floats by, and trying not to drown." The crowd was with her now, and people clapped and cheered her on. Churro yapped with them. "We have to do something about all this," Natalie said, straightening up. "We rallied together and we helped each other as much as we could. That's great, but that shouldn't be all there is. We need more. We needed more to begin with. Patience had empty shelves that could have been filled with food before the storm. And if we'd done something about climate change already, maybe Reuben wouldn't have been so bad to begin with." "What do you want people to do, Natalie?" Maria asked her. Natalie sagged again. How was she supposed to know? They were talking about something way bigger than she was, way bigger than any of them, and she was in the 7th grade. She looked all around for answers, at Maria, at Patience, at Cheryl, at all the people of Liberty City who'd come together. No one of them had the answer, but the answer was there. "I don't know," Natalie told Maria, "but I do know that we can't do it alone. It's going to take all of us." "Great," said Maria, and she signaled the cameraman to stop filming. "Now, I think we've got the real story, don't you?" she asked Natalie. Natalie nodded, and Patience gave her a hug. "I did it," Natalie thought. "I talked on camera about climate change." You really know your stuff, Maria told her. Ever think about becoming a climate scientist? Natalie laughed. Only all the time. Yes, she said. I want to be a meteorologist like you. You should come by the station after all this is over, Maria told her. Maybe we can do some segments together. You need to get your message in front of more people, Natalie. Get more kids like you fired up about climate change. Natalie was thunderstruck. I will, she said, but she wasn't going to stop there. Suddenly she saw it, what she had to do. If it was going to take everybody to fix climate change, she was going to have to find a way to get as many people together as possible, and Natalie had an idea how she could do it.